Hello. I like you, Sapna. Oh, that's okay. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, by the way. Oh, that's okay. Oh, my pleasure too. Thank you. Well, the Muslim LGBT network is open to all. I did it mainly as a social media platform to connect people from all over the world to come together, to talk about their lives, but to make sure they talking in a safe space. Some Muslim countries, obviously, it's banned, and I made them aware, please don't say anything that will get you in trouble in your country. But it was a way of trying to connect people to speak and come on the forum. And it's a worldwide forum today. We have people from all over the world. It was just another social media platform, and we're everywhere on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Well, on Facebook, we have over 1,000 members. I think it's coming up to nearly 2,000 members. And the other ones, we have, like, altogether, we've probably got a few thousand, between 2,000 and 3,000 active members, just online. But we have hundreds of members within the UK. I'm based in the UK, so I was born and raised in the UK. And, online, yeah, it can go up to anything up to like 3,000 members. But 100 of us I know of personally in the UK. Like, people think every Muslim country bans homosexuality or got the death penalty, but it's different according to your jurisdiction. They tell me about how life is for them, and I always make them aware, please don't say anything that will incriminate you or get you in trouble with your local authority. So it is difficult. I mean, some countries ban it. They tell me that obviously they cannot be open about their sexuality. Other countries have lengthy prison sentences. So although there's no death penalty, you could go to prison because it's illegal to be gay. So it depends. There are very few countries, Muslim countries, where it is legal, tolerated. So yeah, it's very difficult for most Muslims that don't live in the West. So like Muslim majority countries, I do admit, it's a very difficult thing to come out, or be openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. I was born in Luton. My parents came from the Indian subcontinent, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those sides. So yeah, I mean, I was first generation born in this country, but it was very hard for me because where I live, we had a large population of people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. They used to call it the Indian subcontinent in those days. Now it's called South Asia. But I'm nearly 50 now. It's better. I'm lucky. I live in a country where it's legal and in a Western secular liberal democracy. I found out later on, meeting people and talking to people from all over the world, that in fact I was very lucky. It's just my community, because we were an immigrant community. We weren't so open about it. That's the only. But nowadays, people in this country, they talk about it quite openly. It was very negative at first, because in those days it was very frowned upon in our community. Even though we lived in the West, we still didn't talk about those type of issues to do with sexuality. So it was negative, very negative in my formative years. So it took me until I was 30 to really come out. And by then we had the internet, So that's where my family knew, my friends knew, but to the whole world, I came out when I was 30, and that's why social media has been a platform for me as well. It does impact, on me and my community because we have to deal with sexuality and race and religion. So we call it intersectionality in the West. It's the intersection between all of those things. It does affect you more than like if we're just dealing with race or just dealing with sexuality. So it does. Normally people, when they see me, the first thing they see is me, a South Asian man. They don't really know my background or who I am. So that's the first thing they always see, my name as well. Racism has been a big thing in our community. We deal with that first and foremost, really. When we walk into a room, it's who we are. They don't necessarily always see our sexuality. Well, especially after, when 9/11 happened, the September 11th, 2001 attack, I lost most of my white European friends. That was like overnight almost. I considered them friends, but they were dropping me like a hot potato. And that's when I started to look into my identity more. Like, where am I from? Where are my parents from? Culturally, who am I? Religiously. Because before then, I used to have friends of all races, nationalities, religions. But then I started to get more into my community. So yeah, 9/11 really made me become much more retrospective. It makes me feel bad because I spoke about it. You see, we had the first ever Islam and sexuality intersectionality conference in Birmingham in the UK a few years ago, and my talk was on post 9/11, how it affected our community. Because remember, we might be LGBTQ plus, but still outwardly we look, say, South Asian or Muslim, So there was a lot of that, And we had attacks. They were in London. We had the 7/7 attacks, 2005 in July. And there've been others like in Spain and in Europe. Yes, it has been post 9/11. It's been a process of bridging the gap between communities and about communicating with one another. But all of us really finding out much more about who we were. We were second, third generation British Muslims, but we realize today that there's still a lot to be discovered in terms of communities. We speak much more to our communities around us. It taught me that I was hiding my identity, you see, growing up to be accepted by the British people. That time, like recently, we've come out with the European Union, but we're part of Europe. And I traveled all across Europe as well. And I wanted to be accepted always in my life. That experience after 9/11 showed there were, pockets of racism, intolerance in Europe, in my country, which I didn't really know about. It taught me to understand my community better and myself, because I wasn't a practicing Muslim. I'm not even now. I'm culturally Muslim. They made me understand and go back to my faith more, go back to my community, because culturally, most of the Muslims, like I said, we're from South Asia in Britain. Our connection to India, so it's now India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Just really finding out. I went back, find out about my roots, went to those countries, and tried to research more and make me understand what was I doing in this country. Why did my parents come here? What our connection is with the United Kingdom and colonialism. So yeah, it's been a positive thing for me. For me personally, it's been online trolling and online hate. There's nothing physical. In the early days, I've even had physical altercations with people, but nowadays, because it's all online, that kind of world has gone. People are more tolerant, but you still get online hate. So that's what I deal with. But I look at it as it's an occupational hazard. For me, I would report it. Don't get me wrong. I tell everybody, report it, please, to whoever, your local authorities, report it to the companies, the platforms themselves. And if it's, sometimes even the police get involved. Yeah, for me, online hate mainly something I deal with. And my community, though, is different because we live in the UK, we're protected by, British law. And so in many ways, we're protected against that kind of hate speech. So I feel sorry for others. And that's why we started the Muslim LGBT network, because they don't have those safeguards. People, they're still being attacked on the street. Some come across homophobia every day of their lives, and they are even discriminated by law. So I try to look at it in a positive way. That look, I'm in the West. If I do get hate speech, I report it. But I think, okay, I'm kind of taking it as part of the job. But even that, I do find it difficult sometimes because the online world, it must be hard for young people, particularly growing up. So that's what really is my kind of angle now. I'm trying to help more in reporting online crime, hate crime. As a Muslim, initially, I found it difficult talking to, say, even my local mosques, because we call it a khutbah. A sermon is a khutbah. In Arabic, the word is khutbah, it means sermon. There'll be sermons on, say, sexuality, and I would ask questions. And, I found it quite negative, my religion's attitude towards homosexuality. It was just my religion, because I understand we're from the Abrahamic faith. But there were other faiths, like the Vedic faith, who had much more tolerance, acceptability about these things. So I found it hard initially talking to elders in my community and just people in general. And that's why we went online. We could talk to people initially online in the UK. I made friends, and then now across the world, we feel like a community. But it's hard, even like me living in the UK. We're quite a conservative community still. You don't see many same-sex couples. If you go to a wedding, say, or wherever. So it's difficult. Stuff like that is very hard to overcome, those obstacles within our community. I still feel we're behind. We are backward when it comes to LGBTQ plus polemics issues. So yeah, it's been difficult for me, but it's getting better because they're online now. You can see I've had talks with local imams. I've spoken to people. I've attended multi-faith conferences, and these are not just local but nationally. By no means, I'm not an expert on Islam or on sexuality, but lived experience, yes. I do talk about, it is difficult to talk about those things, but we have to as a community, and we are now, slowly, it is changing. Well, it's not just a Muslim thing, because we're part of the Abrahamic faith. Our Christianity, Judaism, Islam are linked through the Prophet Abraham, and our teachings come from the Old Testament, which was the Torah, which is Abraham, and then to the New Testament, the Gospels, and then to the Quran. So what we recite and what we talk about when it comes to sexuality is actually from the Abrahamic faith. We are also part of that tradition, and that's why. But what they've moved on is Christian and Jewish faith. When it comes to sexuality, we have many within our faith who still take it literally. They have a literal interpretation of the Quran. They don't contextualize it, read it in context of its time. And we quote, the Prophet Lot, and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and there were towns in biblical times. For me, it's been about, I've joined Abrahamic conferences, Abrahamic services, and I've joined up with reverends and from other faiths as well, Jewish faiths, to talk about those things. Because in Islam, we don't really understand where our teachings come from. We don't really understand that we're part of a long line of tradition. So what we're talking about happened thousands of years ago, and we recite it. I give it a context within the Abrahamic faith, and I feel in that way I can speak, because I have allies. I live in a predominantly Christian country in the UK. So Christian allies, we have a large Jewish community too. We all come together. So in that way, I feel, the Muslim community kind of listens more, when you have other people with you as well, because, we share, those same teachings. Yes, I do. I mean, Friday is like a religious day, like Sunday for Christian people at church. We meant to go, and I tried to go, But unfortunately, not every Friday I can. Or Eid, especially, I'll be there. When you have our festival of Eid, we have two Eids, which is like Christmas or Diwali. But I do go mosque occasionally. It feels now is actually much better because our mosques are much more open. Before, women weren't even allowed in mosque in the UK, but now women go and they're more open to the public. They have open days where the public of any faith or no faith can come in and see what they do and what Islam's about and ask them questions. Gay people are just tolerated. I'm allowed to go and pray. I'm allowed to be who I am to a point, but it's still not blanket kind of acceptance. We're just tolerated. If we were fully accepted, we could really be ourselves. Like I was told when I came out, I asked an imam, and I said, "Oh, I'm gay." And my imam said, "Okay, that's okay, but don't talk about it openly." And that's the rule I broke, you see. you know, and I haven't been back to the mosque that I grew up near because of that. I was told it's okay, you can be gay, but obviously when we go to mosque, it's not about sexuality or anything like that. It's just about being in the holy place, you're praying, whatever. But they told me even outside, I can't speak about it. So that's what I do find difficult. Like, okay, you're gay, we accept it, we tolerate it, but not. It's not like blanket acceptance in the sense that we feel really a part of our local community. They're not discriminating against us. That's the only thing. At one time, I was being physically assaulted. That's gone. But I still get hate from Muslims who live in my local community sometimes. They find me online and they abuse me online. It's very difficult. Yeah, that's why I feel it's not just about me. Because when I talk to other people, younger than me as well, because I'm nearly 50, I've not just in my town where I live, I'm talking nationally in the UK and internationally. It's very difficult because Muslim community is conservative when it comes to sexuality. And they don't always look at the gray areas. It's always either black or white. But like I said, our texts come from other faiths like Judaism and Christianity, and they can see those gray areas. So that's why I do feel sometimes they shut down the conversation and they don't want to speak further. Acceptance is something to a point. Like I'm allowed to go to mosque. Okay, I understand that. But I feel like I can't be openly gay, and I was told that. And subsequently I've spoken to other religious people. We call them the ulama. Mainly where I live in the West, the clerics. They came from other countries. Don't get me wrong. They don't like people talking about their sexuality, irrespective. It doesn't matter if it's LGBTQ plus. Even if I was a heterosexual male, I don't think they'll want me to talk about my sexuality. They're conservative. Oh, I was extremely hurt. I lost faith with my religion, my community, and for a while I stepped back from everything. If I can't be my authentic self, who I am, then who can I be? I live in a country where it's legal. Many of us, we fled from colonial India. They still keep it. Like in India, I know now it's legal. You have same-sex relationships being legalized, but under the 1860 Penal Code, Section 377, many of the countries in the Commonwealth still have that rule. Like neighboring Bangladesh and Pakistan have it. So Section 377, 1860, Singapore has it. India repealed it. So it was very hard because I have rights in this country, but I can't exercise those rights, I felt. And that's why I started, the whole Muslim LGBT thing, not just me and my other colleagues, because we felt like if we can't be ourselves, and it's not just talking about sexuality and being open about sexual matters. It's just about being your authentic self. Like you can speak about your faith, you should be able to speak about other issues pertaining to your faith. You should speak about who you are. I felt I couldn't talk if I had a partner. I couldn't say that I had a partner. I have to hide that. Someone who may be a part of my life I may have been with for years, I have to deny. And I've done that in the past. I've denied their existence. And that's been hard. Nowadays, I don't. If I do have a partner, I will say, yeah, it's very difficult. It's not just having a partner. It's very difficult not to be yourself, especially when you live in, like, I live in the West. Like I said, many of our members do come from other countries and they sought sanctuary in the West. I know many friends from Bangladesh or Pakistan, and they've come here because of Section 377. But they understand that even in this country, that our community is conservative. So yes, I was very hurt when the Imam said, and that's still the case. They don't want us being out there flaunting our sexuality, and that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is talk about our relationships, our humanity, who we are, and just be ourselves. But they think all we're going to talk about is sex, which is not true because we're human beings. We're multifaceted, ordinary lives like everyone else, and we're interested in everything else. So yeah, I do feel like denying an essential part of who I am. I couldn't do that, and that's really upset me actually. Well, for me, actually, I became much more insular. I would pray at home. I wouldn't go to mosque. I would pray at home, and I read about my faith at home. So we have a lot of other, resources, information about our faith, not necessarily just the Quran and Hadiths, and they call it the Siras, the biographies of the Prophet. Islamic world became at home. It was something I started to do in private, and I thought, okay, because if I can't be public about it, but I still kept it. I still kept that identity. Although, like I said to you, I wasn't practicing, like I wasn't praying 5 times a day. I wasn't even praying 1 time a day, but I would try to keep that. Try to read about my faith, or sometimes read my holy book and understand that, hold on, maybe I'm still a part of that. And I still believe I'm still culturally Muslim. There are some, practicing Muslims who identify also as LGBTQ plus. But for me personally, I've always kept that it's a part of my identity culturally, and I can't deny it. I grew up with Muslim people, celebrated festivals. My mum and dad come from that part of the world. So for me, all my friends I grew up with, my relatives, feel much more part of it. Other people like me as well. We do meet up as well sometimes, time to time. There are others who meet locally where I live, nationally. A faith should, in many ways, is a private thing as well. For a lot of people, it's not just about reading in communion. We do have a Friday where you go to mosque, but it can be a private thing too. It doesn't have to be that you have to have faith and just practice it yourself. And your partner could be of a different faith. So I've come to learn about much more about myself. When I wasn't connected to my community, it actually made me stronger inside. Having that time on my own. Yes. I would advise people to be open to others and learn from humanity. We're all one. I live in a country we have multi-faith. You'll have a temple and a synagogue, a mosque alongside each other on one road, and you get that in India. A secular constitution, which you have so many faiths. And we're doing even in Pakistan, Bangladesh, with the minorities, but we have other minority faiths as well. And it's about living with one another, faith or no faith, accepting people the way they are. It'll make you a better person. Because we have to understand that people who are gay, particularly imagine if they live in Iran, they could be privy to the death penalty. They're not pretending to be gay, and they've been killed. Thousands of people have been executed in countries like that because they can't change who they are. So we cannot change who we are. So other people have to give us their hand in friendship. Speak to us, speak to other people. You'll see we have so much in common. Without gay people, we would have no art, no literature, no whole. The medieval period, Renaissance came through with Muslims. We have a connection. We were part of that kind of flourishing of art in the medieval period in Europe, and gay people have been part and parcel of the arts in the West and even in the East. And we're always part of the Islamic world. Gay people have always been a part of it. They just haven't always been as vocal. But in the past, we've had, homoerotic literature, particularly within Islamic, culturally Islamic community. Being gay has always been part of the Islamic world, as far as I know. It's been part of other Abrahamic faiths. I know the Vedic faiths, much more tolerant, accepted. Buddhism, Hinduism, accepted much more. I know even Sikhism, which is not Vedic faith, but they do have issues with homosexuality. But it's by every single faith that all none just come together in humanity and accepting one another. And I live in a country where we do that every day. I could be Sikh and walk into a Gurdwara, or anyone can. Sikh and walk into a mosque and pray. And I've had Hindu friends who pray with me in the Eid, and I've been with Hindu friends on Diwali and prayed with them. Do you understand? I live in that type of country where we accept people irrespective. Also, if you don't have any faith, if you're agnostic or if you're atheist, it doesn't matter. We're all human beings, and I can say that freely in this country. That's all I say to people. It's like, please, let's communicate. No hate speech. We have community guidelines with the Muslim LGBT network. Our community guidelines is just respect on, and just bottom line. She goes into detail a bit more, but no hate speech is allowed. Yes, absolutely. I think it's mainly to do with jurisdiction as well. If you live in a Muslim majority country, what I explained before about, if it's illegal, how can you come out? You'll be subject to prison sentence, lengthy prison sentence, or even death. So that's not even an issue in those countries. It's illegal. And okay, if you were to say a Muslim who lives even in the West, say, where you have some freedoms, even then, your community you might feel might not accept you. So many people who identify as LGBTQ plus can't always be open. They might be more than 2%, and it probably is. But I give you an example of the trans community in Pakistan. There's a marker now on your passport. It's accepted, because it comes from the ancient kind of Hindu text as well, the Hijra. Pakistan's Hindu ancestry, Bangladesh, we have the Hijras. They are accepted as a form for them in the LGBT community, trans community, and they have a marker like, you can be trans. So, and that's a major, massive route forward for a Muslim majority country. Although it's not, Muslim, it's got minority. I'm sure there are much more Muslims, if they were able to be open about the sexuality, we'll talk about it. In the West, when we do surveys and, there are much more people, who identify. But it's difficult, when you go around the world. Because they used to say anything between 1 in 10 and 1 in 16 people in the world are gay, identifies being LGBTQ plus. So that means if it's anything between 1 in 10 and 1 in 16, when you've got over 1 billion Muslims in the world, there's going to be a sizable minority that identify. But unfortunately, they're not in a position to come out. And the kind of work we do is to speak freely, because I can, and others like me, wherever we are in the West, and we talk about it. But I don't want to put anyone at risk, you see. If they're in a country where it's illegal to be gay, it'd be very difficult to talk about those issues. When the Taliban came into power in Afghanistan, I had so many people contact me in the UK. They want to flee to the UK, asylum, refugees. And that's a big thing as well. So it's something that's being repressed. There's not a voice or a platform for the LGBT community in those countries. But, that's what we're trying to do in the West. We're trying to build up a sense of community and well-being within our community. Trying to say, you can voice your concerns. You might be from Pakistan and now you say you're settled in Norway, example, but you can talk about, okay, this is how life was in Pakistan, if you feel free enough. But sometimes those people, when they do, they're not allowed to go back to Pakistan, or Bangladesh, because they worry about the reaction of the local community there, or even the government. So I just say, be careful who you are, but where you are. Ultimately, it's a community that's on the rise. And globally, I do feel there's a movement towards LGBTQ plus activism within Islam and Muslims. And ever since the Arab Spring, when you heard that Arab Spring more than a decade ago, there were Muslim activists, gay LGBTQ plus, LGBTQ plus activists who were part of the Arab Spring. They weren't openly talking about their sexuality, but they were protesting with others for human rights. And that's what I do. I talk about it within the auspices of human rights. Because LGBTQ plus rights are human rights. So in that way, we can talk about human rights, and that everybody is afforded human rights. And I know Muslims across the world who have been involved in human rights activism. So that's the way forward, really, through human rights. Well, thank you very much. You know, because I did find it difficult. A lot of people can't speak openly, so they do talk about human rights. Other countries, remember when they speak about human rights, they're talking about the whole human race. So amongst them, those activists, they may be LGBTQ plus activists. They just can't be open, and they'll be protesting on the streets. You might see them on your television protesting in Tunisia or Egypt. I know personally people who have during the Arab Spring. They used to contact. They were my friends who work in human rights. I'm very hope things will change in other countries too, and that they are. Things are changing slowly, slowly in the other Muslim majority countries as well. Well, just my final thoughts are like I look at India as an example, who repealed the 1860 Penal Code, Section 377, which pertains to same-sex relationships. I know they haven't gone far enough for when it comes to marriage, because obviously that's still illegal, same-sex marriage. But there are talks in those kind of around those issues about legalizing maybe same-sex relationships. And I look at India as because a lot of the neighboring countries, we have people living from the Pakistan, Bangladesh, and we look to India in that sense that India is a conservative nation with different faiths. You have one of the largest Muslim communities on earth. It's far bigger than even Saudi Arabia, where Islam began. I could be in India and be a Muslim, and I can have a same-sex relationship. So I'm trying to say, like, but next door I could go to Pakistan, Bangladesh, and not. So let's look to India, a conservative nation which has repealed it, and I hope slowly, slowly, we will cut those ties of colonialism. A lot of countries, they use colonial law. They don't use Sharia to persecute homosexuals or LGBTQ plus. They use colonial law. They've kept them since 1860, but we've moved on. So yes, I look towards the future, and I think I just wish and hope that everybody one day could be free, like I am. And if they can't, I'll spend the rest of my life working towards that. Yeah. No problem. Thank you very much, Sapna, for having me. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on your podcast. And I'd like to say thank you for everybody who is listening. And, may Allah, God, whoever you believe in, if you don't believe in God, be with you. May your spirits live on forever. Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.